Hi Year 4, hope you're all okay and that you are enjoying the sunshine today. It's absolutely beautiful, so if you can go outside and make the most of it, then please do. I've seen lots of your board games so far this week. You've sent me some pictures and videos of you making them and your sets of instructions to go with them, which are absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to share them with the rest of the class tomorrow. I'm not going to talk anymore. We are starting from page 150, so if you have got the book at home, please follow along. Does everyone around here have a pet beetle? Uncle Max asked, huffing. I don't, Virginia sulked. I wish I did. Why don't you get a puppy or a rabbit? They're not as cool, Virginia replied, as if Uncle Max had asked a dumb question. But he was staring at the firefly, and Dorcas could see he was concerned. What's wrong, Uncle Max? Nothing. I just don't understand where all these beetles are coming from. Uncle Max scratched his head. They're bigger than normal beetles, and they seem... well, it's as if... Yes, Dorcas leant forward. I don't know. I'm probably imagining things. Uncle Max shook his head. Getting funny in the brain must be my age, he sighed. And look, in all the excitement, I've forgotten my manners. What a terrible host. What can I get you to drink? Uncle Max looked from Virginia to Bertolt. Coffee? Mint tea? Does anyone fancy a licorice stick? A mint tea would be lovely, Professor Cuttle, Bertolt said politely. Thank you. Could I have some orange juice? Virginia asked. Orange juice? Right, of course. We're right out of that. Perhaps I should nip down to Mr. Patel's and get some bits and bobs. What goes well with orange juice? Biscuits, Virginia replied. Custard creams or bourbons. Dorcas and Bertolt nodded. Marvellous. Well, don't let me stop you getting on with your homework. I'll pop out for the supplies and deliver the refreshments forthwith. Uncle Max backed out of the door, beaming at everyone. He's nice, Virginia said, when she was sure he'd gone. I've never seen a grown-up so pleased about a kid bringing friends home, she laughed. Dorcas felt his cheeks grow hot and changed the subject. Why the demands for orange juice and biscuits? Well, I don't know about you, but I don't like mint tea or licorice sticks. Virginia raised an eyebrow. I prefer orange juice and biscuits. Anyway, I thought we needed to talk in private, so let's do it quickly before he comes back. She put her hands on her hips. First thing I want to know is how Bertolt got himself a beetle. She stared at him. Did you catch it? No. Bertolt looked horrified. The firefly was in the tunnel after we left Beetle Mountain. It followed us. When you ran in the shop, I talked to it a bit because... Bertolt looked at the floor. I didn't like being on my own in the dark. Talking to the firefly made me feel braver. He turned to Dorcas. I lost it when you came back. I thought it had flown away, but it must have hidden in my hair. Perhaps Newton chose Bertolt like Baxter chose me, Dorcas said. Virginia flared her nostrils, scowling at the idea. Dorcas, Bertolt blinked. How do you talk to Baxter? I don't know. I just do. Can you teach me to understand Newton like you understand Baxter? I'm not sure. Dorcas looked at his beetle crawling across the coffee table and frowned. I haven't really thought about how I do it. What is it that lets you understand what he's telling you? Can I hold Newton? Dorcas asked. Of course. Bertolt offered Dorcas his cupped hand. Dorcas gently lifted Newton, placing the beetle on his palm and lifting him to eye level. Hello there, Newton. Nice to meet you. The firefly fluttered up and flashed his belly at Dorcas. Why, thank you. Dorcas nodded to the beetle, looking closely at his face and thorax. Bertolt, I think he uses his belly to communicate. Watch what he's doing with it. He turned back to the beetle. Can you flash once for yes and twice for no? He asked. The firefly flashed once. Virginia and Bertolt gasped. That's amazing! Bertolt squealed, barely able to contain his excitement. Baxter talks to me with his body, Dorcas said. He shakes or nods his horn, flicks his antennae or waves his legs. If you look really closely and carefully at what the beetles are doing, you'll understand them. Bertolt was impressed. He held out his hand to take Newton back. I found a stairway in the Emporium, Virginia said, keen to talk about something else. That leads from the shop to the flat upstairs, and Darcus found a key to the Emporium shop door. We heard them talking, Darcus added. They think I'm still tied up in Humphrey's bedroom. They plan to climb in the window, get rid of me, and then sell the Beatles to Lucretia Cutter. I wonder what they'll do when they find out that I'm not there. He smiled. They're so stupid, they'll probably think the Beatles ate you, Virginia laughed. She looked at the wall and the book-stuffed shelves between Uncle Max's flat and the neighbours'. It's weird to think that all of those Beatles are on the other side of that wall. I mean, how did they get there in the first place? She turned to Darcus, looking thoughtful. If Lucretia Cutter has got something to do with your dad's disappearance, and the connection between her and your dad is to do with Beatles, don't you think it's weird that there's a mountain of super Beatles living next door to you? Darcus frowned. He hadn't thought about it before, but it did seem an unlikely coincidence. But I've only lived here for a couple of weeks, he pointed out. The Beatles must have been living next door for ages. Look at the size of the mountain. How long's your uncle lived here? Bertolt asked. Oh, years, since before I was born. Could the Beatles have anything to do with him? Bertolt asked. I don't know, Darcus shrugged. He does behave strangely when he's around Baxter. We should ask him, Virginia said. How do we do that without telling him we broke into next door? Darcus asked. I don't know, but you should definitely ask him more about Lucretia Cutter. If your uncle thinks she has something to do with your dad's kidnapping, that means they must know each other. He dodges my questions about her. I think there's something important he's not telling me. Like in the museum, he told Margaret not to tell me they were going to give Dad's job to someone else. He thinks if he tells me the truth, I won't be able to handle it. That's stupid, Virginia scoffed. It's much worse not knowing. Tell me about it, Darcus sighed. Then let's try again. All of us, together. We'll do it when your uncle brings in the orange juice. As if on cue, they heard Uncle Max's keys in the door downstairs. 5 minutes later, he entered carrying a tray of orange juice, biscuits and mint tea for Bertolt. He laid it on the coffee table. Thank you, Professor Cuttle, Virginia said, picking up a glass of juice and flashing him an innocent smile. Darcus was just telling us about his dad disappearing and how you and he are going to solve the mystery. It sounds ever so exciting. Well, I wouldn't say. Bertolt and I would like to help, wouldn't we, Bertolt? Oh, yes, Bertolt nodded enthusiastically as he reached for a biscuit. That's very kind of you, but we heard all about the visit to the museum, Virginia said, talking over Uncle Max, and about Darcus finding the reading glasses and how the lady on the sticks turned up. And it turns out Bertolt knows all about her, don't you, Bertolt? Lucretia Cutter, Bertolt nodded again. She's in all the magazines. They call her the mad scientist of fashion. Do they now? Uncle Max looked like there was a bad smell in the room. Well, I suppose if the cap fits. But we were wondering, how did you know who she was? Virginia asked. I beg your pardon? I don't mean to be rude or nothing, Professor Cuttle, sir, but I wouldn't think you were the kind of man who'd have an eye on the catwalks and fashion magazines. Virginia, Bertolt scolded. So I was wondering, Virginia continued, when you saw Lucretia Cutter in the museum, how did you recognise her? Uncle Max's mouth fell open. He closed it. Yes, Darcus leant in. How? Do you know her? Virginia persisted, taking a bite of a biscuit as she waited for him to answer. Uncle Max looked at the three children and, with a great sigh, sat down on the couch. Well, actually, yes, I did know her once. Was that before she was famous? Virginia shot Darcus a triumphant sideways look. Yes, it was. Uncle Max pulled at his earlobe and looked into the distance. How did you meet her? Darcus asked. Through Barty, Uncle Max admitted. He introduced us at a party. But how does Dad know Lucretia Cutter? Darcus asked. They met at university. Dad went to university with Lucretia Cutter? In a way, Uncle Max shook his head. It was a long time ago, Darkus. Your father hasn't spoken to that woman for over 15 years. Then why did she turn up at the museum? Darkus asked. And why is her name above the room that Dad disappeared from? Darkus, if I knew the answers to those questions, I would have told you already. What Darkus's dad and Lucretia Cutter did at university, Virginia said. Was it to do with the Beatles? Uncle Max blinked as he thought about his answer. Barty's specialist field was beetles, but Lucretia Cutter was a different kind of scientist, a geneticist. I think her interest in beetles came from knowing Barty. His passion for beetles was infectious. Once he started talking about them, you couldn't help but become fascinated too. What about you? Virginia asked, leaning forward and taking another biscuit. Did you ever have anything to do with beetles? No, Uncle Max shook his head. You've never had any beetles here in the flat then? Darkus asked. Uncle Max looked terribly uncomfortable. Oh look, we need more biscuits. He jumped up and hurried out of the room. You're right, Darkus. There's something he's not telling us, Virginia whispered. There are loads of biscuits left. He didn't explain the connection between your dad and Lucretia Cutter very well, Bertolt said. It must be more than just meeting at university and chatting about beetles. Yes, we need to find out more, Virginia nodded. And I know exactly how to do it. Darkus stood up, putting his hand in his trouser pocket and pulling out a white rectangle of card. I'll ask Novak Cutter. Can you remember who Novak Cutter is in the story? Just think back to a couple of weeks ago when we introduced the character. I'm not going to tell you the answer, we're going to find out. You're going to Towering Heights? Virginia's eyebrows shot up. Darkus nodded. Saturday morning. Darkus? Bertolt gasped. That could be dangerous, and she may not even know anything. Yes, Virginia cocked her head. But then again, she might, and I'll bet she can tell us other stuff that will help with the beetles, like why her mum really wants them. There we go, that's the answer. So, Novak Cutter was Lucretia Cutter's daughter. She looked at Darkus. You can't trust her though, she's the enemy's daughter. She'll probably lie to you. She may even hand you over to her mother. I'm not frightened of her, Darkus said, bristling. If Lucretia Cutter is behind Dad's disappearance, then I want to know. Thursday and Friday after school, Darkus and Bertolt and Virginia worked on base camp. They drew a map of Furniture Forest and taped it to the back of the wardrobe, marking each booby trap they've built around the perimeter to warn them if hostile forces approached, and hooked up an alarm system made of bottle tops threaded on strings, which jangled when a trap was set off. The days quickly passed in a flurry of scavenging, building and planning. Newton had made a permanent home in Bertolt's hair, and a trail of fireflies, Newton's friends and family, had followed the beetle out of the Emporium and into base camp. When Saturday morning arrived, Bertolt and Virginia met outside the Emporium. You're wearing a bow tie. Do you like it? Bertolt looked at his chest. It's a bit smart, isn't it? It goes with my tank top. Bertolt looked over his glasses disapprovingly at her clothes. Virginia looked down at her red tracksuit. It was pale and baggy at the knees, a hand-me-down from her sister, Serena. She pushed Bertolt towards the Emporium doorway. Come on, hurry up and open the door before someone sees us. I'm going to pause there for today. Just as a side note for next week, I'm in school every day, so I may be able to record a video and upload it, but I may not. So if you don't have a text message or an email from me with a link, it's because I haven't had a chance to do it. So I apologise in advance, but I will make up for it when I'm not in school. I'll see you soon and stay safe. Bye.